incorporated her into the Way International.
And welcome everybody. I appreciate your coming out tonight to this brand spanking new library that opened in December. And I believe this is the first live stream event. I'm lucky to have the opportunity to live stream. So hello out there if you're live streaming in. Hello in here. And it's an honor truly to share this little book with you. I want to thank the staff here at the library, and in particular Dr. Ruth Edwards, who's the Director of Education. I happened to run into her right when the library opened, and she said, we want to have you come back and talk about your next book, which she didn't know I was writing. So I thought, okay. And she offered me this opportunity in the Writer's Salon series to come and share my new book, From the Porch to the Page. This book did not start out that way to be this kind of book, and I'll tell you the little story behind that, because I think a lot of times when we have book events, and I will read from the book as well, but I know I like to hear about how a book developed and why the author wrote that particular book. So welcome everyone, come and sit wherever you like. Thanks for coming. And I also want to say that I did write some of Undertow, my first book, in the old library building in Winter Park. It's very special to me, and what a better place to have a book event in, in a library. It's the best place, in my opinion. I want to acknowledge some people that are live streaming and very essential professionals who helped produce this book with me. Every author knows their book is a work of love by a team of people. So those people helped make this book, as they did the Undertow, very beautiful in my view, and a good presentation for the content. My book editor, Alice Peck, in New York, I'm waving on the live stream. She's tuned in, and I can't say thank you enough. Her husband happens to be the book designer, Dwayne Stapp, and they're acknowledged in the book. You can read all about them and the other folks. And some of you in here were first readers for me, and my friends, my writing friends over the years, and it's very special to see you here and share it with you. Also, Crystal Shershin out in California did the final line editing for this book too. And that team of people are a part of my life and my heart now. I'm getting choked up because during the process of this book, our team suffered a tragedy together. And I have to tell you, because I dedicated this book to this person. And her name is Ruth Mullen. She poured out her heart and life into Undertow with me. I remember it was Labor Day in 2016, and we were on the phone for a long time ironing out the final things for the book. And she was getting ready to work on this book with me again, with Alice and Dwayne. And after Alice sent me her feedback, it was within days after that Ruth suffered a terrible tragedy and passed away. So we honor her tonight, and I dedicate this book to her. So we love you, Ruth. Thank you for all you've done for many writers. She was very active in the community in New York and the Freelance Writers Association, and worked with many people too. On the live stream also out there, I want to acknowledge my daughter and son-in-law out in Washington State. Mwah. And my husband is here tonight, Hoyt Edge, in the back up at the top of the stairs. So the cover, I'll get right to it because I had somebody ask me immediately when they saw the book, okay, where's that beautiful place on the cover? There's a photo, first of all, of me sitting at a table in a cafe. And behind it is an enlargement of that same area. And this is in Kos, Turkey. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that on page 135 if you have your copy with you. This book started out as a collection. I kind of handed it off to Alice, and Hoyt and I had talked about the material in it. There are 25 poems and 6 stories and about 35 little essays. And those essays originally were blogs published on the Florida Writers Association website. I was invited to write for them. So I collected them and just put them in a document. And I handed it to my husband to get a little feedback, and he said, being the wonderful teacher he is, he said, why don't you use some of your work to illustrate the lessons that are in these essays? You know, like put them in between, intersperse them to show what you did when you said write good dialogue, or when you said how to set up a scene, or whatever it was. And by that time I was a little overwhelmed, and I said, oh gosh, I don't know, it's so much work, and I don't know if I'm up to it or smart enough, and I'll just send it to Alice and see what she says. So I did. And guess what Alice said? Why don't we restructure this book? Okay, you get the idea. And that's what happened. And in light of that, it kind of presented itself as a guidebook. So it starts out with readers become writers, and the closing part 11, is if you want to keep writing. So this particular little essay is about writing behind the scenes in Kos, Turkey. And opens with the quote from Rumi, the poet, the mystic poet. Maybe you're familiar with him. He's the founder of the Whirling Dervishes, and when Hoyt and I took a trip to Turkey in 2011, we visited Konya, Turkey, where he is buried and where he was from. And he has been an inspiration to me through the years anyway, so I wanted to use this quote here. Secretly we spoke, that wise one and me. I said, tell me the secrets of the world. He said, shh, let silence tell you the secrets of the world. While in Turkey, 2011, my husband Hoyt and I spent a night in the town of Kos, K-A-S, a delightful fishing village on the azure Mediterranean Sea. Kos was an idyllic spot to land in, muse, rest, and write. Seafood tasted salty and delicious, especially the fried calamari, which I love. We were on the last leg of our month-long journey through the ancient history-laden land once called Asia Minor, and I had a lot to say about the trip. I wrote a detailed travel blog, I took extensive notes while traveling, and when we returned home, I wrote a detailed travel blog about our Turkey adventure titled From the Edge in Turkey. We're not corny in our family or anything. That vacation truly fascinated and educated me about ancient history, art, and archaeology, but writing about it was not a holiday. Although it wasn't in the category of travel story described in the previous essay, Writing Meaningful Travel Stories, it still required detailed work. On the cover of this guidebook is a photo Hoyt took of me on the porch of the Hideaway Hotel, where we stayed in Kos. I'm mulling things over, considering what to write in my journal that lies ready on the table in front of me. I look to the sea as if searching for words to capture how I feel. I love that kind of time before the actual writing of anything. It's like puttering around in the garden for images and metaphors. It's akin to whiling away an hour in that garden, mindlessly pulling out a weed, inhaling the rainy smell of earth, taking pleasure in a little brown bird who hops up to you for a closer look. While I'm going through this, be thinking of some questions because we'll have a Q&A at the end, okay? Think up some good ones for me. So as I said, the book evolved, and when I gathered up that material to include, I had come across an acronym called SUD, and at the time, and it really spoke to me, and it stood for start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. And it was a stunning moment for me because we were in the middle of a pandemic and so many things were going wrong, right? And we've been through a lot the last couple of years. So that grounded me, that little acronym, and to start where I was with this material. And I'd written a lot of it over the years, and even starting back in the 1990s in Tampa when I lived there, I had written some poetry at that time, a lot of it then, and got some published. So those 25 poems in here include those. And use what you have. So I used those materials that I had already had, and I tried to do what I could. I also added an S at the end of SUD, which stands for stay in your lane. Now, I don't know if any of you swim. I know my friend Jay does. And we stay in our lanes when we swim, and we know the value of staying in our lanes for swimming and for a lot of other things in life, I think. So that's the story behind the beginnings of this book. When I handed it off to Alice, being the Girl Scout that I was growing up, I was trying to be prepared. And I had this title for this book that was divided into sections. It was like a hotel lobby, and all the chairs were against this wall, and all the tables were against that wall, and all the lamps were piled in the corner. And Alice took them all apart and arranged them beautifully in different little settees or areas that went together. But she took Dwayne. I had Dwayne make the cover already because I wanted to be ready, right? So I had this was the cover, Work Done. And the reason I used Work Done was I fell in love with a quote by Ernest Hemingway. My book club and I watched a documentary about Hemingway. Did you see it, Ken Burns' documentary? 6 parts, I think, and it was a wonderful show. And he said something it really hit me. He said, the great thing is to last and get your work done, and see and hear and learn and understand, and write when there is something that you know, and not before, and not too damn much after. You know, excuse the language, that's earnest. So I just love that, and I used it as the epigraph in the beginning of that version of this book. So by the time Alice and I worked together on this restructure part, I thought I need a new title, and I really love this this photograph and kept it and came up with this title, From the Porch to the Page. There is another book in the world called From the Front Porch to the Front Page, and it was written by a newspaper man back in the turn of the century, I think it was. You can look that one up. But I'm going to read a little bit now from my handy-dandy colored index cards. There's, as I said, there are some stories in the book, and they all feature a character named Melanie Craven. And Melanie Craven is sort of my alter ego in a way, sort of not, but that's on page 196 if you've got your book with you. The main story that anchors the book together, in my view, is called From the Porch, and it's a longer story, and it comes in the section about writing stories. The different sections include writing poetry, writing travel stories, writing memoir, and so that story takes place on a porch, on a screened-in porch, and it's about a writer. But it's too long to read tonight, so I chose this one, which was came before that one in time as far as when I wrote it. And I wrote this in response to a prompt. We got a lot of writers in this room, I know, and you use prompts sometimes to get the engines going and what to write about. And this one came from a prompt from the Florida Writer magazine, and it had to do with start your story with somebody knocking on a door. And I thought, I don't want just a regular door. I want an unusual door. So this is what I did. Melanie Craven, snug in her cot, squinted through the lamplight, half reading her book, half re-examining her zigzag life, when she heard a tap against the tent pole. Had someone knocked on the pole as if it were a door? In the faded khaki light, she could not connect the sound with any shadow. The pattern of self-reflection. Was her life formed more by what she'd done than what she'd failed to do? Spun through her thoughts as she considered the noise. Had a skittering creature tap the pole and run? She signed on for this tour to escape her techie career, think of new options. Down went her book on the blanket that Bob's Iberian adventure tours had provided. Up struggled Melanie from the droopy cot. She loosened the cord of the tent's front flap, a demarcation between in and out, and let the canvas door fall open. Shocking cold air covered her face. No one. She peered through the haze. She saw no moving figure, detected no human scent, heard no swish in the underbrush. Her movement toward the flap had been too slow. Melanie imagined the knock was just that, imagined. In the morning light at the campfire breakfast, Melanie examined familiar faces. The hiker from California, with tanned rivulets mapped on his face, sat cross-legged on the ground. He scraped his fork across the gunmetal plate to rescue every scrap. The iron skillet, steady on a flat rock, held more overcooked eggs, as well as the hiker's attention. Close to the fire ring, the honeymooners from San Salvador whispered their secret language while perched next to each other on one large rock. Melanie felt a pang of envy at their sweet commiseration. Both scientists, they specialized in the study of bats. Melanie wondered whether such work had drawn them together night after night, but might someday drive them apart. On separate boulders, worn smooth from years of travelers' bottoms, sat Mrs. Devona and her husband. He had not spoken this morning, not that Melanie had heard, but she did hear Mrs. Devona, a spike of a woman, prattle to the guide. Why in heaven's name is it so cold here in the jungle at night? That brook behind our tent is freezing cold, just as cold as the Arctic Ocean, and I thought this was supposed to be spring. In the fire pit, ashen embers, orange embers, crackled and fell apart. Melanie waited as the guide, 40-something, totally gray, thought of a reply to this woman. He gazed up at the pale morning sky and said, "But isn't the air invigorating here? No pollution." No one responded. He took a quick gulp of coffee from his metal cup, then said, "And the green trees and grass all around, it's just awesome." He raised his cup in a salute, adding, "And don't you all just love the variety of songbirds here? Absolutely amazing." In that moment, coffee sloshed out of the cup and landed on his shirt sleeve, but he didn't flinch. From the front pocket of his travel vest, the kind Melanie saw in catalogs, he pulled out the familiar red kerchief dotted with stains and wiped his shirt and forehead with it. When she'd first met this guide, she wondered how he managed to move so easily inside the train, the bus, the Jeep, given those bulging interior pockets. She'd nearly bought such a vest herself, but left that fashion mistake unmade. What the guide claimed as amazing really was amazing, except Melanie believed silence was also amazing. If only the guide included that in his selling points for Mrs. Devona. But Mrs. Devona seemed the kind of woman unused to silence. She often referred to girlfriends back home and cocktail luncheons she missed because of this trip. Taller than Mr. Devona, she stooped to meet his eye. Today she wore a candy cotton pink scarf around her ropey neck. The Devonas hailed from Colorado. Melanie learned that from their name tags at the informal, get-acquainted, torturous mixer. Mr. Devona had just quit his executive job at a lumber company. Outdoorsy experiences were his current penance. Melanie learned that while sitting in her assigned seat next to Mrs. Devona at the dress-up superfluous kickoff dinner. After breakfast was abandoned, tedious repacking completed, and weather complaints efficiently sidestepped, they piled into the Jeep. Melanie reclaimed her seat in the rear, her back to the group. From this position, she saw where they'd been. Witnessed tire tracks grow in the dirt, became hypnotized away from the others, their gear, their talk, except for Mr. Devona. He had not yet spoken. Mr. Devona, hunched beside his wife while gazing out at disappearing scenery, brooded over the flicker of khaki light, the canvas door, his trembling hand. I've been thinking about writing prompts, and somewhere I read in the last few days, there was someone suggested in a newsletter or something, here's one just for the road to think about this week. Here's the prompt. What is the opposite of a gun? So let's let our imaginations think on that for a little while. There is some writing advice from the track that I'd like to read to you on page 25 if you have a book with you. This is another essay. And these essays are little, they're short, and they're also divided, they have subtitles to them too. Writing advice from running track. Are you overwhelmed, as I often am, by the swirl of writerly information? Where have you discovered sound writing advice? The best advice I ever received was not from a writer-focused resource. In 10th grade at James M. Bennett Senior High, I joined our school's first women's track team and learned an important lesson about writing. Mrs. Baker, not her real name, our physical education teacher, inspired enough of us female wannabe track stars to make up a real team. Heady with excitement, we were proud to be the first. Giddy, we'd stand around in our royal blue gym uniforms, spring wind blowing our ponytails, the tangy smell of mown grass wafting in the infield. Such novices. Most of us did not own real athletic shoes. I ran in Keds. In small-town USA during the late 1960s, we didn't know better or have better. Nor did we know much about this sport. I liked to run, but had a lot of questions. How do you leap over those rickety hurdles? What about the relay race? If you cannot look back, how do you grab and not drop a baton from the runner behind you? When and how do runners breathe? What do you do if you trip and fall? Don't jump the gun. Mrs. Baker was gentle. She encouraged us and made sure we listened. Her motto was, don't jump the gun. Because I was nervous, wanted to win, and thought I knew what to do, I anticipated the starting pistol firing before it did. Bang! I was already down the track. Come back, start over, pay attention, run when it's time. Hint to writers, don't jump the get published gun before your work is ready. And that was advice I should have taken at this point in this journey with this book. Get good coaches. Maybe you've watched hurdle jumpers at the Olympics on television. I was never that good, but wise Mrs. Baker recognized my determination to run the hurdles and asked the star hurdler on the men's track team to coach me. Patient and instructive, he became my hurdle brother. He made sure I practiced after school, no matter what the weather. With care, he demonstrated how to keep my back leg bent in the proper position at the perfect angle so my toe didn't drop while I leapt over the hurdle. When your toe even slightly grazes the crossbar of the hurdle, guess what? Down you go, you're facing the track. That spring, we competed against one of the few high school women's track teams in the area. Kelly green infield grass and parents who cheered us onward filled my peripheral vision. Ahead of me lay white lines that divided gray lanes where hurdles, placed in regulated increments, resembled dominoes marching into the distance. The starting pistol fired. We leapt out of the blocks. Focused straight ahead, I cleared 1, 2, 3 hurdles. Then it happened. The number of steps I needed between each hurdle got thrown off. I shuffled to adjust, but my legs did not react fast enough. I don't know if the phrase off track originates from track team jargon, but I do know I got out of step and went ever so slightly out of my lane. That was my downfall. Literally, my back knee dropped too low, my toe caught the hurdle, and I hit the ground. Get up and go. I was more embarrassed than hurt, sprawled on the dusty track, my face aflame. I shut down. I heard nothing around me, even though I'm sure people called out from the sidelines. They later told me so. What I did hear were voices inside me. My parents, my coaches, my hurdle brothers, that formed a chorus. Get up, keep going, Charlene, just finish. With eyes down, I wanted to disappear into the crowd, but those inner voices persisted. I hauled myself up, rubbed my burning knees, and limped down my lane toward the yellow finish tape, askew and limp on the track. I stepped over it. Our team had bonded well that spring, and my teammates patted my back in forgiveness. My coaches were good sports too, pleased I hadn't run off in tears. The rest of the season is a blurred memory of chilly afternoon practices and sore calf muscles. I can't remember whether I came in first or second or third place at any other track meet, but that's okay. Sometimes failures more than successes teach you lessons you need the most. The inner chorus, get up, keep going, just finish, was not only the best track advice I ever got, it's the best writing advice I ever got and can ever give. I stare down those hurdles on every page, don't you? All righty. There's two poems at bookcase, hi, come on in folks, friends, that kind of bookend an essay is what I'm trying to say. And it's on, let's start, it's page 28. So there are two poems written at different times of my life, and the essay sandwiched in between was written within the last 3 or 4, 5 years, I guess, too. So I'll start, it's page 28 is the poem. It's called Still. So you get a theme going here, silence, stillness. Still. Be still, my lips, let my mind speak now. Be still, my hands, so I can feel the peace I cannot touch, but touches me when I am still enough. Be still and receive. Great ideas fly through the universe all the time. Stand still long enough and one of them will hit you. That's a quote. That was Isaac Asimov's answer to the question of where he got his fantastic story ideas. At least that is what fellow science fiction writer Ben Bova said of Asimov, scientist and famed author of nearly 500 books, many in the genre of science fiction. Of course, the universe is rife with great ideas. But to catch a great idea, Asimov said, a person must be still. My dad and Asimov. When I was a kid, Asimov's novels lay scattered around our house. My father would settle in his black Naugahyde chair, a lamp shedding light over his shoulder, and plunge into a paperback with Asimov's name on the cover. I never asked Dad what he liked about those stories, but perhaps he felt a kinship with Asimov's imagination. Asimov, born in 1920, passed in 1992, and my father, born in 1912, passed in 1997, were contemporaries. And both were scientists. My father was chief scientist at our county's public health department. As a microbiologist, he looked through microscopes day after day. He spent hours in stillness. Sometimes when I visited my father at his laboratory, he'd let me peer through high-power lenses to witness the movement of otherwise invisible life. I saw purple-stained amoebas, green squiggles, and reddish bits of life moving on their own. These life forms, which science made it possible for me to see, remind me to be still long enough to let an idea hit me. Perhaps a children's story about a lavender amoeba. Stillness required. To see microscopic life, stillness is required. And isn't stillness also essential for writing? Those after-school be still lessons in the laboratory likely swirl around in the background of my writing consciousness today. And they show up in the poem In View that follows this essay. I remember another set of lenses Dad acquainted me with, our large telescope. If a solar or lunar eclipse was on its way, just like it was this past weekend, or just for the fun of it, Dad would set the telescope up on the front lawn, and it would transport us to another place. He showed me how to adjust those cumbersome lenses and focus on what he described as Orion, the Big Little Dipper, or Venus, Saturn, or Mars. For those hours, we traveled across eons of time and space to the twinkling lights in the black distance, imagining what was out there. Catching ideas. Flash forward to 1995 when I heard Ben Bova pass along Asimov's advice at a Space Coast Writers Conference in Cocoa Beach, Florida. I sat enraptured by his talk of stories spun around scientific facts, other worlds, stars, planets, and moons. I recalled my father's love of science, that he read Asimov's books, and how he introduced me to tiny amoebas and mysterious planets. He showed me that to capture the riches of science, I had to settle down. Bova's secondhand encouragement from Asimov, be still to receive ideas flying through the universe, may now be third-hand advice, but it remains first-class wisdom. And the poem that goes with it is In View, from my father, Joseph Lammy. At night, near pine boughs, my father would stand in our front yard, search measureless heavens with moonlit eyes. He'd lower our telescope, steady on his tripod, and with his sight settled in the instrument's cup, he would turn and say, "Here, be still and watch the moon." Or, "Can you spot the Little Dipper?" Simple forms for me at 8 years old. On tiptoes, I'd search through the magical lenses. By day, my father examined tiny creatures alive in glass dishes. He peered through microscopes at purple-stained amoebas, teaching him by shape, color, and movement who they were within their cryptic spheres. He would turn again and say, "Here, be still and watch the paramecium," big word by then, familiar to little me. See them swim and dodge each other. On tiptoes again, I'd search through a lens, enchanted. I think of you today, Dad, among those rolling jewels in heaven's palm, amid treasures shared on summer nights, as side by side we stood and met them. Sometimes we get ideas from other people's stories and lives, and one person told me a story once about an adventure that he had in a trip to Africa. And this was early on. I was just getting to know this person 20-some years ago. And soon thereafter, after he told me this story, I wrote this poem. It's called Encounters, and it's for my husband, Hoyt. Maxine Kumin writes of animals, their habits, needs, and wants. Like humans, the wild ones spend 5 senses and hidden powers to survive. Surviving, you're with me at the table. Our food is spread before us, bread and cheese and wine. I learn you are a man truly spared. 5 lions gave you up one African night, your Jeep stuck in spinning sand. Unmoving in your seat, you think the end. It's been a good life. I think of Maxine's poem, Encounter in August. A bear stole into her camp, looked her in the face, ate her beans, lumbered back into the wild. Your lions spread themselves atop the road, dazed and gorged by the bloody kill, too poor-sighted to understand the difference between machine and man. Their eyes glowed in steady headlights while you surveyed memories spread before you, like bread and cheese and wine. Jungle kings, dazed and weary, satisfied and dull, sauntered back into the wild. On mornings as I wake with you, I thank them. So thank you for your attention. And at this point, we'll say goodbye to the live stream audience, or maybe not. We'll have questions. Entertain your questions if you've got some for me. I know some of you may be interested in self-publishing. I did self-publish both of these books. It was a journey. Included in this book is, in Appendix 1, is a whole timetable of writing my book Undertow, all the editing processes it went through until publication. And that whole book, because of the nature of the story, it was my memoir about spending 17 years in a fundamentalist Bible cult. I was a leader and a researcher and escaped my family. So that took some extra doing to do, and took longer than maybe this one. And there's also a magazine article about from the manuscript to a book. That it was a magazine article that was published, so that's in here too. But if you've got questions about that or anything else, questions? Yes, Nilda?
Could you explain a little bit more what you mean by staying in your lane?
Staying in your lane? Okay, that's a good question. The question is, she's asking me to explain a little bit more about staying in your lane and how that applies to the writing life. And to me, that applies to understanding, and it relates to that acronym, SUD, SUDS, start where you are. So to start where you are, you got to know where you are. Okay, where am I in my writing life? What skills do I have? What do I need to learn to get better? What if I want to write a novel? How do you write dialogue? I might need to learn how to do that more effectively, which I had to do for Undertow. Actually, I did learn and apply myself to learn more about dialogue. So to stay in our lane, I think what it says to me is that, I don't go blowing off, writing about stuff I don't know anything about. I do my research, I learn, I experience what I can, and if I don't know about something, I'll do the research and find out about it. Does that help? And do your homework. I mean, I think that doing our homework is, a lot of times we tend to, and I get that, we want somebody to tell us how to do this. It's not easy work. It's hard work. I've got one of my former writing teachers is sitting over here in 1987 at Valencia Community College. I'm going to embarrass you. Linda Goddard is here, and Linda, I remember, got us going and thinking about how we felt about things. I mean, writing is feeling. When you write something, you want the audience, the reader, to feel something. That's what music does, right? It's an emotional thing. It's not just a dry intellectual exercise. Well, we need dry intellectual exercises for other purposes, but for poetry and stories, these things pertain to the human condition, and that's what we're trying to speak to, I think, as writers. And it's a mysterious process. Nobody has the answers. We use the phrase, the writing life. I mean, that's in my title, a guidebook for the writing life, as if the writing life is one thing. But it's different for everyone, and it depends on where you are, what lane you're in, maybe, when you begin. But to begin is to start where you are. How's that for a Zen ending? Yeah. Yes, right, Andrew.
Just want to make sure.
Okay.
Behind me. I didn't want to cut anyone off. You said you got your book edited. I was wondering, how did you get to go about doing that?
Yes.
Did you hire someone?
I did. I did hire. The first person that worked on Undertow was a local woman named Marianne DeStefano. Some of you might know her. She runs Mad About Words, and she's a mainstay of the Florida Writers Association, in my opinion. So Marianne, that was back in 2011 or something, and she evaluated the manuscript for Undertow, and at that point it was humongous. It was ridiculous. It was over 700 pages, and I had a quote for every chapter, and I had notes and references. I mean, I needed to do that to get the whole thing out there. And over time, I worked for 2 more years after she gave me an evaluation. I worked for 2 more years. And then a local writer, Joni Shrim, who wrote, yes, My Dear Boy. But the first one was about her father who was in the war. And he was a Jewish man who fought in the war, the Second World War. I can't think of the title, I'm sorry. But she found Ruth and Alice in New York. Hi, Ruth, Alice, up there on live streaming. And Ruth did the line editing for me, but Alice did the book structuring work with me. So Joni had met them and worked with them, and she referred me to them. So it's a matter of interviewing people and networking, I think, and finding the right fit, finding an editor that understands where you're coming from and working with them. There's a lot of fine editors here in Orlando, too. So I would recommend you interview different ones before you hire somebody. And the same with the designer for my book, if you're going to self-publish. And book designing is not graphic arts. It's an animal unto itself. So be sure you know what you're getting. More questions? Linda?
I've got 2.
2. One at a time.
When do you begin before you even put pen to paper or fingers to keep?
I can't hear you. Can you speak up a little bit?
I'll take my mask.
Okay.
When you begin a piece, before you even put your pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, do you go through some kind of an internal process? For example, for me, my house gets really clean.
Yeah.
I'm milling it over in my head.
Yeah.
So I was wondering about that.
Yeah, I do a lot of house cleaning too. The question, yes, I want to repeat the question. The question is, before I start working on a piece, do I go through some kind of process, interior process, or other processes? As for example, Linda says she cleans her house a whole lot before she works on a piece. And I think it's interwoven, my life as it is now, and it happens to just be an interweaving of house cleaning and scribbling and revising and editing and working through something. But what I do is almost every morning I write in a journal. And I've been doing that for many, many years, and I've got, I don't know how many, and I write in those black and white composition books. Those are my journals. So that really gets it out for me. And whatever comes down gets on the page, and nobody sees it but me. And I talk about that in this book too, about your journal. Nobody should be reading it unless they have permission. So it's your free place where you can relax and put whatever's on your mind, sort things out. That's how I sort things out on the page. But I can't really say I have a process. But I think a lot of writing is intuition, and revising is like moving that furniture around that I described earlier with this manuscript until it just seems right, and you get feedback. And I can't emphasize that enough. There's some writing groups in here tonight. It's wonderful to see the camaraderie and the trust that we have as writers and respect. So getting feedback from people that get you and know you and trust, and you trust, is important. And I've got some of you in here tonight that did that for me and love me enough to do that, so I appreciate it. Second question, okay, because she was my teacher, I'll let her ask another question.
Your writing is so natural and so you. Did you struggle to find your own voice, or did it just come to you?
I think it all takes time, everyone. Okay, the question is,
Well, tell them what I said her.
okay, yes ma'am. First, and Linda was my creative writing teacher, as I said before, so what she asked was, she complimented me and said my writing is so natural, it just sounds like me. And how was it that I found my voice? Is that pretty much what you asked? So, growing up, I read a lot until I got hooked on one book, which was the Bible. and I stayed with that for 17 years in that Bible-based cult. The language and the beauty of the writing in those scriptures definitely affected me. All the writing that I did before that, I think all the reading that we do in our lives affects us. We read good literature, we read things that are well done. It starts to get in our rhythm too, I think. But Peg Lance is sitting here in front of me. Peg and I have become friends. She's written more than 10 books on nature, and she's a naturalist. She can tell you what every plant in the backyard, in your backyard, is and what it's good for, if you can eat it or not. And she is an amazing woman who has reminded me again that when you write, just write the way you talk. She writes nonfiction. So, of course, if you're writing fiction, you're not going to write the way you talk necessarily. You're going to write characters and you want to adapt the way they talk to their character. But I think it just takes time. I'm still learning. I'm still struggling. I still, trying to figure things out. I'm working on another Melanie Craven story right now, and it's all over the place. So thank you for that compliment, but I think we say finding your voice. I don't know where you find it. You have it. It's who you are. And the more we grow, the more we are loved, we blossom. I have to say that's important for writers, to feel some love from some corner, from some person, and support that helps us, strengthen up so that we can speak our voice, can speak what's inside of us in a way that's from us, and we're not just trying to imitate somebody else. Does that help a little bit, Peg?
You mentioned the journaling, and I was going to ask you about your journaling. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was going to ask you about your journaling because I know you did a great deal of it with your first book, which needed many, many notes to make it as accurate as you did, which I admired greatly. Have you always journaled? When did you start? Were you a young child?
No. No, I didn't. I did write. The question, my husband's reminding me to repeat the question, and thank you. The question is about journaling, and she's asking me if I started journaling when I was a kid, or when did I start, and how important some of the journaling was to the creation of my first book, Undertow. I think when I was a little kid, I had a little diary I maybe kept for a little while, but that's long gone. And then when I got into the Bible cult, as I referred to it, I threw out everything that was personal because those things were considered unspiritual or not related to what we were trying to do in our Bible organization. And we used scripture verses to back up and justify why we would get rid of our personal things. They weren't important. And so sadly, I don't have things, except I do have one little poem that that I wrote in second grade. And it's in this book. And you know what? I'm just going to read a little bit from it. But the journaling didn't really start in earnest until I was a student at Valencia. And before that, maybe in Ohio, when I was still working at the headquarters of the Way International, which is the headquarters of this controlling organization. I started going back to college out there to Ohio State, had a branch down the highway in Lima, Ohio. So I started journaling then because I was trying to sort out my experience at the time. I had one foot in the cult and one foot in college. And I was trying to figure out who I was and what I wanted to do and needed to do. So writing then started the wheels turning and helped me grow and heal me. So I would say around that time I did start the journaling. But the poem, where is that? Anybody? You got people? It's the Dagnabbit.
The title?
What?
The title?
Where do poems begin? It's called The First. It's in the section on poetry writing. That's where it is. And where is that section? Keep moving. Writing poems, section 5. Poem, the first, page 99. I wasn't going to read this, but what the heck. It's 10 to 8. We still have some time. Anybody falling asleep out there? No? No? You wouldn't admit it if you... Okay, 99. This, I wrote this for another poetry reading I did at Rollins College in the year 2000. Dr. Leslie Laws was hosting a reading of students and from the Holt School, the evening program, and I was a graduate by then, but in 2000. So I wanted to entertain a little bit. You know, you have serious poems. There are some very serious ones in this book that I just can't even read tonight because I would break down crying. So this one is on the lighter side. It's called The First. Who knows what poetry is, where it comes from, where it goes? I'm not sure what it's fashioned of or how to make it live, or if one poem is often more than one. I do remember writing down my first for Joey Briscoe, not his real name, in 2nd grade. You're the light in my lamp and the bounce in my ball. You're the glue on my stamp and the paint on my wall. What is that? A way to say Joey is my everything. Where did it come from? A heart full of joy at this blonde-haired boy. Okay, that was in 2000. I'm writing this book. Between that time and the time I'm putting this together, my sister finds the original typed poem in a bunch of mementos of my family in a box she had and sent it to me. The whole thing in all its glory. So here it is. When your Cupid shot his arrow, it pointed straight at me. And here is a verse my Cupid shot at thee. And then the same stanza. You're the light in my lamp, the bounce in my ball, the glue on my stamp, and the paint on the wall. You're the crust on my pie, and the point on my dart. You're the gleam in my eye, and the key to my heart. You're the ring in my phone, and the rug on my floor. You're the seat in my car, and the bright in my day. You're the wish on my star, and the think of my say. You're the jump in my hop, and the flame in my fire. You're the bang in my pop, and the round in my tire. You're the bow in my hair, and the tune in my song. You're the core of my pear, and the length of my long. You're the source of my blush, and the thought of my think. You're the comb with my brush, and the roll in my rink. You're the beat of my heart, and the smile on my face. You're the go of my start, and the win of my race. This may be a long way to say, be my Valentine. Okay, that's it for tonight. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time. And good night, live streamers. Thank you for tuning in. Okay.